Tom or Rico, could you do an audio check for Fiscal real quick?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep, sounds good. Thanks.
Blue. Well, we will call the Fiscal Affairs and Audit Standing Committee meeting to order. Yeah, welcome to everybody. Yeah, glad you good luck this year putting up with me in this chair. Moving from the wing to the middle is a little different, so we'll see how that goes. But look forward to a good year, on Fiscal Affairs and Audit. Yeah. The first item we'd like to do is have anybody in the crowd introduce themselves, and we've got two students from Pitt State. So if you two would introduce yourselves.
I'm Daryl McLean, student body vice president.
Corey and Daryl, welcome. Yeah. Anybody else want to introduce them? Luther? Yeah.
Ed Penny, I'm here representing Tiger Ready. We built or any executive director of the development plan.
Welcome, sir. Welcome to everybody. And with that, we'll get into the agenda items. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the June 11th Fiscal Affairs and Audit Committee. And I don't know, seeing that I was the only person there I guess I'll make a motion in a second and say aye on those minutes based on my recollection. If any of the six of you in front have any other recollections, we'd accept those at this point in time. But with that, I guess we properly should take a vote of the committee. All those in favor say aye.
I can second. And I.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Yeah, the next item on the agenda call that we had at the beginning of September on the 2nd, Regent Prasker had a question regarding the step-up approach and any capital project costs. I don't know, Chad, do we have anything to add to that? Neelima, do we need follow-up on that? I know we will have a presentation later talking about what Chad and the CFOs have worked out as far as project costs and what would be brought back to the fiscal affairs or the board at any point on different projects once they get into the process, so that the whole idea is that we can kind of expedite things on campus and not always have to come back before the Fiscal Affairs Committee or the board, and slow down projects on campus. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I might interject for Chad, the board policy changes that will be discussed, I think it's on tomorrow's discussion agenda, were developed with the mind toward trying to give greater flexibility for managing cost adjustments. We're seeing a lot of cost inflation over time for materials, for labor, for the overall cost. And as staff worked through the concept of instituting corridors or a stepped approach to project approvals, it was thought to be very unwieldy, trying to manage project corridors on a project level. So rather than doing that, just a dollar amount
Yes.
stepped up for greater latitude for the CEOs to approve their own projects up to 1.5 million. And then Blake Flanders as board president, giving him up to $10 million. But knowing that as things change, the board still must do the largest projects and still have oversight of those, and also approve the initial program statement at the very beginning of a project.
Right. I think my question mainly was when we are deviating out of the initial budget that was approved by the board, what is the process that we follow? And do we do an initial estimate, then the project starts, and then we do a secondary estimate, and then the project is almost completion? But I think what we are trying to say here, if I understand it right, is we initially get approval, and if there is a deviance of X 1.5, looks like, it could go to President Flanders and get his approval. And if it goes beyond 10 million is when we,
Yes.
what's who approves 1.5 to 10 million?
So that would
Come to the,
under the proposed policy on the agenda, it would be Dr. Flanders.
okay,
Now, for the practicalities of managing cost overruns, if you will, or where projects are going to cost more than expected, that is for the campuses to sort out how they're going to finance those cost overruns. And I don't know if anybody wants to comment on how, as a practical matter, how you manage through that process internally as you realize, hey, we thought it was a $3 million project, now suddenly it's 4.25 million.
I mean, one of the challenges we're getting ready to bring forward a cancer center, which is a $350 million project, but it's jointly done with the health system. You really have to think about contingencies before you take it to the, so what we need to, you try to build in probably bigger contingencies than you used to because of the uncertainty of all the factors in there. So that's about the only way you can manage it, and you got to make sure you have the financing up to that contingency amount. But if it goes above that, and I can speak to probably all of us about every project, you're in the re-engineering, what's the term we use? Changing the scope, looking at the project, scaling back, and that, so we usually do these with a fixed amount of money, and you end up scaling back a project or deferring something for a later phase. I don't know if any of you.
And I think one thing we were looking at, because this question came up last spring in the committee, is, yeah, getting the money is one thing for scaling back the project, but it was just the avenue that they continually had to come back to fiscal affairs or the board for each cost overrun. And it was even minimal dollars. And each time you did that, depending on when you do it, it could be.
Right, the
another
project
month,
is
2
jeopardized,
months,
that's-
Yeah, and just put a lot of time delay into the construction projects. And it was already after it had been approved by us.
Mhm.
Yeah. And, the work is going on. It's like, do we need to come back and get approval again for this if they have the funds to do it? So, hopefully, with what we present this afternoon, and these questions will make this a little more expedited, for the universities going forward.
One thing to keep in mind when we often take these projects forward, they may be 30% designed or whatever, but they haven't been bid. And until the bids come in, you can get surprised. So they're highly educated, likely proper guesses, but you've seen in the last 2 years, bids come in and on, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing because of labor shortage and everything, and you just could never have anticipated it. So we're coming back. So that's what this will help with, I think.
And, inflation, increase of costs because of many reasons on products would also help. I just wanted to understand what the policy is, right? Not to create more work in this process, but actually what is the policy that we are looking at? That's, if I get that clear, I'll be happy.
Anything else there? If not, we will move on to new business, and we've got Mike Lowry on by Zoom here. This is to receive an external review for Fort Hays State University. We receive a external review either when an administration at a university changes or every 8 years. And fortunately for all of us at Fort Hays, this is the 8-year review, not any kind of administration change. So with that, Mike, we'll turn it over to you.
Good morning. Mike Lowry with Allen Gibbs and Hulick. As you mentioned, we were engaged to do the external management review for Fort Hays State University. And I appreciate the flexibility in letting me attend remotely. Had too many meetings all of a sudden pop up on my calendar today. So as mentioned, this external management review was triggered by the board policy that reviews be conducted no less than every 8 years. The external management review involves a review of non-public funds of affiliated corporations, with non-public funds being defined as those accounts that do not run through the state's accounting system. For Fort Hays University, there are 3 controlled affiliated corporations and 1 non-controlled affiliated corporation. The controlled ones being Fort Hays Tech Northwest, Fort Hays Tech North Central, and Fort Hays Athletic Association, and with the non-controlled affiliated corporation being Fort Hays Foundation. I will take a minute and just provide the board with a summary or highlight of our procedures, which included interviewing the president and the direct reports, collecting and evaluating conflict of interest forms, reviewing board minutes, reviewing any operating agreements between the university and affiliated corporations, reviewing any audited financial statements of the affiliated corporations to ensure compliance and consistency with those requirements, and then working with finance office to identify and gain an understanding of the flow of non-public funds and those transactions. And I'll just back up 1 minute and say that the scope involved fiscal years 24 and 25 for Fort Hays State University. The populations and samples included any transactions from non-public funds equal to or greater than 500, and then any payments to the president or direct reports regardless of amount that existed at the affiliated corporations as well as the university level. The population of the non-public funds at Fort Hays State University totaled approximately $5.7 million, and we looked and reviewed about 80% of those transactions. As far as the results go, we noted no issues with compliance of policies related to conflict of interest, board minutes, and operating agreements, or the financial statements. And then as far as transactions related to non-public funds, in general, we found the supporting documentation was complete, and we noted no issues in internal controls or the propriety of those transactions. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Committee members have any questions of Mike? Wesley, do you want to add anything to that?
Still getting used to that. Just grateful for Mike and his team working with my team there at the university, our team, and just the process went really well. I thought it was a nice back and forth and working. So thanks, Mike, for your help getting it done.
And I will mention, we did work very closely with Barron, who did a fantastic job in helping us through this project. So,
Without any questions,
I would just add one thing, Mr. Chairman, for the committee's benefit, there will be 3 of these reviews to be done this year. We do have 2 CEOs who have left, Pittsburgh State and Emporia State, so we'll have those reviews coming, as well as University of Kansas, which will be up for its 8-year review with a slight look back. So those will be coming. More of these will be coming soon.
yes, and we do plan on starting on Pittsburgh State very soon.
A general question with regards to the assessment. Do you, as an organization, compare university to university? How does your assessment work?
Well, we have done a number of these, and you know, just through our work, obviously we would use our experience and knowledge gained from other universities, but in general, we strictly stick to the contract and the policies of the board, and make sure that we're, you know, everything we are looking at, we tie back to the policy of the board and make sure that they're following those policies. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes. I wanted to understand, because this is truly not audit, it's a review of.
It's a
the
review.
process.
Yeah, and this is done under the AICPA consulting standards. So
Yeah, I saw that. Yep. Very good. Thank you.
any other questions? Do we need a motion to accept this review?
Would be good.
I will move. Second.
Got a motion and a second to accept the external review from Allen Gibbs and Holick for Fort Hays State University. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, I think all of us have before us the Fiscal Affairs Audit Committee, organization, agenda topics, and work plan for the year. Hopefully, all of us have these meeting dates and topics that we will address throughout the year on our calendar. Probably the 2 changes that will be different this year than in the past years that I have been on the board in this committee. In November, we will have a virtual meeting since we will be at Fort Hays State for a campus visit at that time. And I believe the chair of the regents have set up that meeting as a virtual meeting for all the universities so that not everybody is having to drive out to Fort Hays at that point in time. And then the same thing will happen in April. We will have a campus visit to Emporia State in April, but there'll be no board meeting in April. So we will have this committee meeting virtually on the 31st of March based on how the calendar works for 2 years. So, yeah, kind of some of the comments that the board has received in the past on some of the campus visits. I think last year we got down to Pitt State and they had rolled out the red carpet and everybody driven miles and miles for a 40-minute meeting. Yeah, we decided to kind of look at the schedule this year and have cut out some of those meetings. So not a lot of people are having to travel long distances. But those would be the two changes to what the agenda has been in the past. So any questions on any of the plan for the year? Hearing none, do we need a motion to accept the plan?
I'll move to accept the plan.
I will second.
Got a motion, and a second. We're on a roll. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the overview of the 2026 Board of Regents office budget. Becky, look at that. She's ready.
Thank you, committee. So you all should have in front of you a handed out version of the memo from Vice President Frisbee and myself on the budget, and I'm going to go over some high levels of that. The board office budget is a small portion of the overall post-secondary education budget. Currently, that is a $1.2 billion SGF budget for fiscal year 2026. Of that, 67.5% goes directly to the state universities and 32.5% goes to the board. Of the 32.5% that comes to the board, only 1.4%, which is 5.4 million, is for our operations. So it is a very tiny portion of our overall system budget. Our office does have some key financing sources. We have SGF that we just discussed. We have fees from private post-secondary institutions and different programs such as GED, the retirement plan, and student health insurance. We also have currently federal grants for Carl Perkins and adult basic education. We don't expect any new federal funds at this time. So highlights of the budget is that we have flat SGF support from recent years with minor adjustments only for benefits and merit increases. The fiscal year 2026 budget does include $515,000 for the operations blueprint literacy. That is using carryover funding. It's not new appropriation. And that is up from $351,000 from last year, but that is due to the full year implementation of that program. We do still have in fiscal year 2026 the $500,000 contingency for the CAN-Ed repayment. That is something that's pending FCC resolution and has been for a long time. As part of this process this year, we looked at the categories that we gave you all, and we did some restructuring to give clarity to where the different buckets of funding is and to align them more closely with functions. We separated board-specific costs and staff operations, and we introduced categories to align with strategic priorities. Our new expenditure categories are compensation, which existed before, and that covers basically the 63 FTE of the board and the board and TEA members. The travel and training, which we have now split into a staff bucket and a governance bodies bucket. Operation cost, which is an office operations costs are two different buckets now. The office operations is more supplies and copiers, and the operations budget is more program focused. We have put IT itself in a category to give a good overview of how much the IT costs. That includes computers, cybersecurity, software, telecommunications, and website maintenance. And by consolidating that category, we thought it would improve transparency and streamline the reporting to you. We have now put facilities also in its own consolidated category, and that includes building rent and facility-related work orders. It also, in addition to building rent, includes like the maintenance fees that we pay for the building to the Department of Administration. And then we have the professional service bucket, which is the legal, audit, and consulting are their primary items. And lastly, we added the faculty award, which is the distinguished professorship that is funded out of the staff operating budget. The only major change that you would see this year is in compensation. There was a change in fee counts that were used for some of the compensation. And so the private post-secondary fee compensation went down some and other fees went up. So I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's probably in here. What are the total number of employees for the board office?
63
I thought that's what you said. Has that been pretty flat through the years?
has been pretty flat through the years. We had a lower FTE reported to the legislature 2 years ago because we had some vacancy positions, but those were filled back in. So otherwise it has been steadily 63 FTE.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, there is a significant growth increase in other fees and private grants when compared to 2024 to 2026. Can you expand on that?
It's that $500,000
Okay,
contingency.
perfect. Okay. I kind of assumed that it's the E-rate contingency.
Yep, that's what it is. And then the other part is there's some additional compensation that moved from the private post-secondary bucket into that bucket.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any other questions? Blaine, any additions? Becky?
No, a small but mighty team.
Try.
Becky, thank you. With that, I would take a motion to accept the budget for the KBOR office for fiscal year 2026.
I will move.
Second?
And a motion, a second. Yeah, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Yeah, we are on to the next item. Yeah, Becky's still up there. This is receive the KBOR internal audit for the alumni account. This is the account that the universities contribute so that the rest of us can have lunch and whatever during the year. So we appreciate the university's contribution to our well-being during the year here. And with that, Becky, hopefully we haven't done anything wrong in the audit. Yeah.
No, we have not. And you took part of my points, which was to give an introduction on what it is. It is held at the KU endowment, for those that don't know. Our audit process is conducted by Kitty DeMars, who is our Associate Director for Finance. She is no way involved in that account. So myself and Cindy Wellborn, who's one of our finance specialists, work with that funding, but Kitty is completely removed from it, which allows her to complete our own internal audit of it. She reviewed the internal policies and procedures governing the fund. She verified all financial transactions for the last fiscal year and matched KBOR documentation. The beginning cash balance on the year was $33,949. We received $28,000, including money for SCOGRO, which flows through there for their lunches now. The expenditures were $26,000, and our ending cash balance is $35,000. There were no discrepancies in the transaction, and no expenses from this fund were used for compensation or benefits for the KBOR president. I stand for questions.
Any questions from the committee members?
Go ahead. Go ahead. It's good. Okay. Only that I'm not
Papers is
clear what this account is.
Okay, so this is the Alumni Council Fund account. So the universities put money into it. It's what's used for like the food and hospitality type items that we do not spend state funding for.
Okay, got it.
The
Thank you very
universities
much.
typically use their foundation funding to pay for it. So it's not state funding in any sources.
Very good. Thank you for that clarification.
I do want to understand if there is a budget we are in changing times. And I think Board of Regents should have a lot more exposure to certain topics. And do we submit for, the regents traveling, not just but the staff's traveling to different conferences to learn? Is that included in our budget?
So that is not in the alumni budget, but we do have travel built into the operating budget that we went over previously to cover those type of items.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Any additional questions? With that, I would take a motion to receive the internal audit for the alumni account.
So moved.
I'll second.
And a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we are to the board agenda under the fiscal affairs. And we've got the consent agenda. Any issues on the consent agenda that any items anybody would like to take off of that? Discuss in further detail.
I'm good.
If not, I'd take a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Moved. I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Yeah, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those same sign, motion carries. A lot of things going on this month there, so we'll get over to the discussion items now that were on the agenda. And we're going to kind of go in a different order here as far as those items and take up the appropriations request last. The first item on there is the act on the distribution of fiscal year 2026 appropriations for the technical education. Elaine, any comments for us there?
So I would like to fill in the committee on some more recent activity in this area. The Tech Ed Authority met last week. I think it was last week. And approved payment. Now let me check. Which item are we on? Are we on the distribution for Tech Ed? Yes, we are. So the amounts were calculated by staff early last week. So the amounts were not even available when we had our agenda call. The community and technical colleges certified their enrollment data to us. The CEOs had until Friday, I think it was the 5th or the 6th, whichever Friday that was, to certify their enrollment data for AY 2025, which is the same as fiscal year 2025. And from all the detail of that enrollment data, we run through all the calculations for the state aid for the 26 two-year colleges. And there is, I believe, in your discussion agenda for tomorrow's meeting on page 146, starting on page 146 and the timeline for when we have to distribute the aid. Then on page 148 has the actual amounts. When we ran the calculations, which for Excel and CTE totaled nearly over $52 million, we do not have that much appropriation for this year. So we prorated everybody's state aid to the same extent. And you'll see the calculations on page 148 for each college, and then the prorated state aid amount next to it. So we were short just over $6 million. We pay for another account or another program from the same account, which is shown on page 149. And we had to prorate the amounts for the colleges that were eligible for their state aid for the Accelerating Opportunity Kansas program. We also noted for the regents 2 other programs for which we did receive enrollment data and we ran calculations for state aid. One is an incentive program to incentivize the two-year colleges to assist students who are seeking their high school equivalency at the same time they're seeking a technical credential. And in the AOK, in the performance-based incentives fund, sometimes called the GED Accelerator, that's in statute, but we have no funding for that program. Similarly, the legislature created books, tools, personal materials, and industry exam benefit for students. That totaled $22,646. So that money would have been for the benefit of students to pay for if they had to buy a book or they had to buy tools or something related to a course that when they were trying to not only get their high school equivalency, but earn a post-secondary credential at the same time. So again, no funding is listed there for those two. But for the first 2 items, for AOK and the Excel and CTE, this funding is for the two-year colleges to reimburse them for courses they delivered last year. So this is a 1-year look back. Another aspect of this is, and another item on your agenda is to give you an update. 2 of the appropriations that were given to the Board of Regents for the two-year colleges. Starting on page 143, there's a refresher course on 2 of the provisos that were attached related to the community colleges only. For the business and industry and apprenticeship distributions, there was language attached that said, if a community college has more than 6 months cash on hand as of June 30, 2025, they would not be eligible for their state aid for the business and industry and apprenticeship distribution. Similarly, the same proviso was attached to the Student Success Initiative for the 19 community colleges, and that's shown on page 145. All of the community colleges certified their estimated cash on hand as of June 30. And of the 19 community colleges, 18 certified amounts that would say that they are eligible for their state aid. But Johnson County Community College did not certify, they certified that they had more than 6 months cash on hand. So then they are not eligible for their state aid. Now that determination is based on their certification as of their estimate. This fall and winter, they will all undergo their usual financial audit. All of the colleges have a financial audit. And we receive those audits. And when we receive those audits in winter or spring, we will then go re-verify everybody's eligibility. But for the 18 colleges that certified, they have received their state aid for those two accounts. All of the other state aid programs that we have for the community and technical colleges, that funding has been distributed also, unless it just goes later in the year according to the statute. All that to say, there is $5.2 million sitting in those two accounts for business and industry and apprenticeship because it hasn't been distributed to Johnson County Community College. So the Tech Ed Authority has interest in the board considering the transfer of those dollars from those two accounts to the Excel and CTE account so that that state aid could then be rerouted to all the colleges to reimburse the colleges for courses they've already delivered. We have the authority to make that transfer in the statute, in the appropriation bill. We have that language with the approval of the director of budget. So we aren't allowed to just move money ourselves. The director of the budget has to okay it, and then accounts and reports makes that change for us. All that to say, there is a partial remedy, or there could be a partial remedy, but we would not want to make that transfer happen until we go back and see everybody's audit next spring. So it will still be in the same fiscal year, but would not be as timely as the other state aid. So that's a very roundabout way to say those two items on your discussion agenda are connected in some fashion. So I want to pause there and see if there are questions about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions. First of all, Johnson County left 5 million on the table. Do we have any idea why they did not do that?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I have not had communication with them to know.
And then second question would be, so when you redistribute that 5 million, will they be in the mix on that?
Yes, they would.
Okay, thank you.
Heather, do you have any feedback on that?
Johnson County Community College is in the middle of a campus improvement master plan and was saving for capital improvements. And so those capital improvements will happen in the next year. So they couldn't get the money spent by the June 30th deadline.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Chair Dicus, if I may ask a question, I was wondering about, Elaine, you explained how the money is distributed in the first place. So for fiscal year 2025, Johnson County Community College received almost double than any other university, 2.930 million. 2.9 million in 2025 fiscal year.
Yes, so if you think of the scale of Johnson County Community College's enrollments versus the other colleges, they are far and away the largest college, the most enrollment among the 19 community colleges.
And that's how we distribute funds, based on enrollments.
Yes, every program has its own unique way of how aid is distributed, but for the case of Excel and CTE, tiered and non-tiered and courses, that is purely on enrollments. And it's enrollment of a course of a student, whether the student is from within the taxing district or outside the taxing district. Is it a Kansas resident student? Is it a non-resident student? There is no state aid. So there's, and then in what course are they enrolled in? And every course is assigned to a certain tier of funding. So there's a great deal of calculation there behind line, each number.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'm gonna have a repeat question. Heather, would you mind explaining that to me again? I'm not sure I completely got why they didn't take that action.
So the proviso came late in the session that you were supposed to have 6 months cash on hand. They had been saving up for this capital improvement things that they're going to do over the next year. So they weren't able to responsibly spend that money down prior to June 30th. So they believe their cash balance will be above the 6 months proviso, therefore making them ineligible for the funding that Elaine was discussing.
It's no more than 6 months.
Correct.
Could they not do what some of these other institutions did and transfer it out even though they were saving for a specific project?
We worked very closely with the Board of Regents staff, and there were conscious decisions made by each institution about what could and couldn't be done and what qualified. They made the decision that it could not be responsibly done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So we kind of got 2 agenda items in one there.
Yes.
Very efficient.
So yes, we're going to cover a lot of ground. The only other thing that I would add, Mr. Chairman, related to this, somewhat related, for the governed 6 state universities, we will have a conversation this year with this committee about adopting new policy on cash reserves. And it may not jive well with what the legislature was trying to accomplish in this proviso for the community colleges, but there was a proposal or suggestion by Mr. McMurray last April when we were at Pittsburgh that the board should consider adopting new policy and bolstering cash reserve requirements for the universities. And so we'll bring something forth from you from COBO on that.
Okay.
Perfect. With that, so we've done, I'm looking on page 6 of the overall board agenda under Fiscal Affairs and Audit Committee for our agenda on Thursday. We've received both the information on the distribution of fiscal year 2026 state appropriations for the community colleges, and then the distribution for fiscal year 26 appropriations for the technical education. So with that information we have received, the questions that have been asked and answered, I'm going to take 2 separate motions, even though we got the information at one time. So we'll do the appropriations for the community colleges first. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
I can second.
A motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The second information we received is on the distribution of the appropriations for the technical education. Do I have a motion to act on that distribution?
I can move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Since it's the chair's prerogative and the chair is trying to use an iPad to go through all of these things, and the discussing and acting on the board policy amendments is right in the same pages without me going clear back to the beginning. Chad, are you ready that we could discuss and act on the board policy amendments at this point in time?
Chair Dicus and committee. Yeah, so this is what there was some discussion on earlier to clarify some of the details of this board facilities policy amendment. This item begins on page 154 of the book today. And to provide a little background, since the board in 2021 established a significantly new section of facilities policy to support the facilities initiative, several updates over the years have been made to improve processes and procedures, and bringing us up to this particular improvement to streamline the approval of changes to previously approved capital projects. And so what this what this amendment constitutes today is an increase of the delegated authority approval thresholds, the dollar amount thresholds. Previously, well, currently, I should say, the universities, the chancellor and the presidents have the authority to approve capital projects up to $500,000, essentially $499,999. Those projects are typically, I mean, we call those small capital projects. Universities are constantly reprioritizing projects, so I think that works very well. But as everybody has acknowledged, with the market conditions and construction inflation, $500,000 is not much. It doesn't go as far as it used to. In a few sessions ago, legislative sessions ago, we championed the increase of the small capital project, what we call the small capital project threshold, to $1.5 million. And that is related to the Secretary of Administration and the state process of selection of architects and engineers. So that change was made for the same purpose, to increase those cost thresholds to support the processes and the approvals of projects relative to market conditions. This then, we feel, bringing that campus delegated authority threshold up to that same level matches for similar purposes. So that would be the first tier. The second tier, which was mentioned earlier, is after the board has approved the capital plan for the year and the program statements for a capital project per board policy. If there are changes, as Jeff mentioned, if after bid, the project has gone up significantly, the university still wants to execute a project. In order to prevent them from having to get into the board meeting approval cycle, what this board policy amendment proposes is that the university could simply submit that change to the board office, and the board would delegate to president and CEO approval of that particular change. And the proposed, we'll call it middle tier, would be 1.5 million to 10 million nominal. I could stop there if there are any questions, or I could continue to the.
Got one question on the up to $1.5 million for the university approval. Is that if the project has already been approved to also where the cost overruns, some change, whatever, they can go up to if let's say it was a $5 million project and it now comes in at 6 million. Yeah, can they approve that in that 1.5 million, or does that still have to come back to Dr. Flanders in that process?
Oh, okay. So Chair Digus, I think I understand what you're saying. Are you talking about the delta or the difference of the amount of the change, so the quantification
Yes.
of the change? So currently, this proposal doesn't identify a maximum on the amount of any individual change. It certainly could, but right now it's simply that middle tier has a wide range. So as written and as proposed, it could be that a project at $2 million originally, maybe the university says, hey, we really we got our construction bids in, it's higher. Oh, and we need to add a whole new mechanical system and some fire suppression. And now it's jumped up $4 million. This proposal wouldn't limit them in the amount of any individual change. So to your point, maybe that's something of interest that needs to be discussed and incorporated into this proposed change. Right now, it's just simply the 1.5 million is it under or over? And then is it
Project as a whole,
right?
Not the or change.
Correct. Yes. But
in your example there, they would have to come back to Dr. Flanders for approval, because that would be in that $1.5 million to $10 million. I guess I'm always looking for how much more authority can we give to the universities so they're not always coming back to the board office or to the board and building in any kind of delay in the project, because a lot of times the delay has caused the cost increases we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And my whole thing starting last spring was how do we expedite this and put our trust and faith in the universities to do the right thing on the project they have without building in potential delays. But if they're just coming back to Dr. Flanders, hopefully that isn't going to be too much of a delay. But I mean, I'm trying to look after you guys and give you some authority. Do you want that, or, you know, where do you, the 6 of you, fall into that question here?
I mean, yes, the more flexibility that we have as we dive into these projects, you know, we do the best we can at the very beginning to estimate the costs when we bring in the program statement. Sometimes we are surprised just like everybody else. And so if there's an opportunity for, after initial approval, that within some range that we wouldn't necessarily have to go back to the board or the board president, that'd be appreciated. On the other hand, I would think if we did have to go back to the president, it would just be simply a letter. And I don't know if he has to actually approve it or if it could just be a notification back to the president in some fashion.
Chad, I'm wondering about the usual timeline when Dr. Flanders signs off on something now. Is it 24 hours, 48 hours?
I mean, we are usually very receptive in picking those up off the hop and getting them back with the same interest and concern, Regent Dicus, that you've expressed. I mean, it's, you know, we're always living in our email and, you know, we're communicating frequently. Usually the universities are even giving us a heads up, hey, this is coming. So, you know, I would say almost immediately, you know, in those cases, you know, unless there's something that we need to discuss and review in more detail, but that's.
And if that's the case, I'm fine with it. If the 6 of you are fine with it.
The other thing I would just add, you know, to that middle tier of delegated approval where, again, after those projects had already come to the board, had already been approved at the program statement level, you know, when we look back annually at those projects in that tier, almost, you know, well, a majority or almost all are typically infrastructure projects. So, you know, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire suppression, exterior roofing, you know, pretty basic projects. And so, you know, $10 million seems like a lot of money, but you'd be amazed how much you can spend on a 50-year-old building in terms of that infrastructure. So, you know, we've seen a lot of projects where, you know, the change in scope might mean, hey, we're going to do 2 floors now, or, you know, we got great bids, we're going to add on to this project, or, hey, the bids came back, it's a tough market right now, you know, it's going to take 2 million more. Those are the range of projects that are living in that 1.5 million to 10 million most typically. And then, you know, above 10 million, of course, you know, all the larger renovations, all the new construction, you know, all those higher profile projects would be north of that, and every single change would come back to the board based on the way this is written currently.
I have a question.
Russell?
Thank you, Chair. Chad, I'm trying to understand if there is a change that requires 20 million, just floating this idea out there. Would there be a possibility where the project is divided into 10 millions?
I mean,
I'm just floating an idea. Hopefully not an idea for you to implement it.
But
Be the last project that was divided that.
But I would like to understand, is there something like that? Like if this is a project, it's identified and we would know these are the changes over the history.
Yeah, Regent Prasker, I mean, if what you're trying to illustrate there, you know, is to avoid, you know, the major, you know, time frame of getting into the board, I mean, I wouldn't expect that ever to happen. The universities are always in communication about those projects. That's not to say that logistically there might not be reasons to look at projects. I mean, anything's possible, and planning is always fluid. But you know, nothing like that would happen to avoid the board becoming aware and approving those projects. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Regent Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I agree with our chair. We have to trust our presidents. We hire good presidents. And so I'm fine with Dr. Flanders approving it. I thought you said this in your remarks, but at least the Fiscal Affairs Committee will be made aware of all those approvals.
Certainly, and that has not been, so currently board policy requires a certain level of approvals, for design development and different, project progress milestones. We could certainly, I could imagine a scenario where we do a report, every meeting and say, hey, these are the approvals or these are the upcoming approvals, if we know about them in advance. As a courtesy or as an accountability step, we could, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, just living up to our responsibilities too as a board. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And
Sorry for that interruption.
yeah, well, and the only thing I would just add, based on the previous progress of developing policy to support, productivity with the facilities initiative, what we've done here is try to re-illustrate in a matrix form. And I apologize, I don't have it right in front of me, so I don't know what, I think it's page 156 of the book. We've tried to tie this to previous updates to policy. Most recently was outlining all of the procurement latitude that the universities are authorized by statute. So when projects are entirely privately funded or when projects are funded with non-state money, there's different opportunities that the universities can exercise. And we've tried to coalesce all of that guidance. It's a color-coded matrix here. Coalesce all of that into one reference for the universities or the board to understand exactly where a project is navigating its approvals. So that is one of the major updates in terms of exhibits in the policy. But Chair Dicus, with that, that's pretty much the conceptual objective of this particular amendment.
Ed, well done. Any other questions? Any comments by CFOs? Anything that, in working on this, anything else that would be helpful to expedite projects, make them work as smooth as possible on the campuses that we can do to help you?
I think, Chair Dicus, I think we just appreciate Chad's working with us as we go through this. We've had several rounds of conversations, so we appreciate updating these policies so that we can have a little more flexibility. And I really appreciate the chart on page 156. That's easy for us to communicate out to our team so they have an understanding of how to navigate the different waters as projects come about. So we just appreciate Chad.
Chad, thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for working together on this. Yeah, any other questions by the committee? If not, I would take a motion to accept the board policy amendments as presented.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now we can go back to the discussion items that will come up this afternoon. The first item in that regard is the Kansas Campus Restoration Act plans from the state universities and system. Any comments, Chad?
Chad, Director
Just
Bristow.
thought you were going to get comfortable over there.
Director Bristow will give an overview at the very beginning, and the CFOs at campuses will be represented and give brief updates to the board. I see this as the second phase of the board's capital renewal initiative. So we've had several years now with the maintenance assessment starting up, the state investment in renovations and repairs and tear downs. And so now we're getting to that next stage with the Campus Restoration Act.
Yeah, Chair, I guess, what Elaine is mentioned there, I think is very apt. And as we've, benefited from those first 3 years of additional state funding via individual appropriations, this represents that long-term effort. And so the board has approved allocations for this FY26 funding and then revised those allocations based on the legislature reducing the amount available to the act in this first year. And so this will be a presentation of all the projects that are on the priority list for each university, acknowledging that this is 6-year term, campus facilities, managing buildings on a campus where, average age is over 50 years. There is a lot of emergent need and reprioritization. So acknowledging that these will probably need to be revised over the years. The universities will present their first priorities, and these the lists starting on page 128, the tables and the list of projects represent those plans that the universities are submitting for board review and approval. And the allocation approvals were contingent on bringing these at the September meeting.
So Chad, when you talked about the smaller amount this year, that was just the 2.5 million that went from 32.7 million to 30.2 million. Is that what you're talking about there?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Chad on the Campus Restoration Act plan? Hearing none, I'd take a motion to receive that from the system.
I wanted to understand the Campus Restoration Act Fund allocation summary. It shows 30 million for the fiscal year 27, 28, 29, 30, and 31. Am I reading that right? You're not including.
Yes, Regent Prasker, yes. So the act laid out 30 million for all 6 years.
Okay.
It was reduced in this first year, I think by about $2.5 million. Yes. So, so the expectation would be that the remaining years would be that full amount per the act.
Thank you.
And the language in the appropriation bill directed us to the board to prorate those amounts across the entirety. So the coordinated institutions also benefit from the Campus Restoration Act. They each are to receive $100,000 apiece, as in the original vision. Washburn University, the 19 community colleges, and the technical colleges, all 7 of them, would receive $100,000 a year.
Thank you.
We had to reduce that the first year.
Sorry, Chad. Thank you.
No problem. Anything else? We'll go back to see if there's a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second to receive the Campus Restoration Act for the state universities. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Looking at the last 2 agenda items that we have for fiscal affairs and the discussion agenda, the last one I'll take up at this point is the act on the Kansas State University Master Plan. And it is my understanding that President Linton will present that at the board meeting this afternoon.
President Linton will do an introduction, and then actually our Associate Vice President for Facilities, Casey Lauer, will actually give the full presentation.
Okay. Anything else? So we will handle that this afternoon, which then on the discussion agenda items, if you aren't sufficiently lost at this point in my bouncing around, we would be to the Board's United State Appropriations Budget Request. Now, does everybody have a copy?
What you would have in front of you would be on page 118 of the board book. And I'll just, as you turn to that page in the agenda materials, I'll just do a brief history refresher. Back in June, the board heard, we had a brief discussion of the items that the institutions and the Tech Ed Authority had proposed for consideration. The board, in its role as an advocate on behalf of the system, is charged in the Coordination Act to develop a unified state appropriations request. So we got that first preview from the institutions and the board office in June. And you'll see a table there on page 119 with the schedule for what we must do in terms of the state's budget process. And this is just one step that we had back in June. And then we had the board retreat and budget workshop at the very end of July when we were at K-State, and talked a little bit about the status of the state budget and where the state legislature has committed to a lot of expenditures in recent years. They've been generous in investing in higher education. And with current projections for tax and other revenues to the state general fund, will at some point in the distant future, maybe 2028, 2029, will actually be running in the negative. And that would be after several years of having high cash reserves, the highest, I think, in the history of the state, frankly. So quite a turnaround. The revenues to the state general fund ebb and flow over time. And so it does appear that we are back in those times of having to think about reducing our footprint on the state general fund appropriation profile. In the issue paper that you have related to development of the unified request, then we gave you some information at the top of page 120 on the generosity of the legislature in funding the student financial aid programs that we administer at the board office for the legislature. And where we used to have 25 or even less, and I think in 2021, we had $21 million for all of our student financial aid. Now for 2026, we have nearly 72 million. So almost a tripling or well in excess of a doubling of state funding for our financial aid. And on top of what we administer, 24 million has been appropriated to the state universities and Washburn University for student need-based aid. And so that has also been very impactful for our institutions and our students. Wanted to highlight that as so important in our budget process. Coordinated institutions, we've got a table there on the top of page 121 to give some context there for the board. For Washburn University and the community and technical colleges and the state aid, all the different state aid lines that go to them as coordinated institutions. And again, you can see where the legislature has put some investment for all of those institutions. And then also at the bottom of that same page, another type table. This isn't the entirety of what comes to us and the state universities, but gives you a sense for the university's operating expenses, where we have had success with IT. We had several funds for several years of funding for IT and cybersecurity, our student playbooks, sometimes called just student success, our capital renewal initiative, the EBF, the EDIF money, the casino funding for the Can Grow Engineering Act. We get $10.5 million for the 3 research universities engineering programs. We've had funding for the university facility demolition for several years, and the 1 year that we received in 2025 for the blueprint. All that to say, it is in that context that the board will be proposing a 2027 budget. Now, as part of that process then, prior to the board's retreat, we received an allocation from the Division of Budget that withdrew, at that point, it was $62 million out of our base funding. And since that time, 12.75 million of that has been restored. So we are now according to the table on 122, you can see the detail of the $50 million that was extracted from our 2026 approved budget. So legislature gave us funding for 2026, the current year, including a pay plan. So we participated in the state's pay plan at 2.5%. And then $50 million was extracted from the base. And of that, you can see 14.3 million for the 2-year colleges, apprenticeships, and business partnerships, the 10.5 million for the 2-year colleges, student success, 5.8 million for the public university student success, 5 million of the capital outlay aid that goes to the 2-year colleges, the $7 million technical college operating grant. We had one scholarship program that was repealed by the legislature, so they pulled that money out of our base at $296,000. So you can see the detail there. So it is in the context of extracting the $50 million that the board has had, I think, some discussions with the universities in reframing and rethinking some of the universities' requests. So that's kind of the context in which we find ourselves today. So I want to stop there and see if there are any questions.
A lot of
A lot of questions.
Um, I think foremost is I want to recognize the increase in student aid for this. That is phenomenal, significant. And I would suggest that we bring in like return of investment, kind of a study on that to look at how we can promote such, unified approach to back to the legislation so that they see the impact on, I would say. Um, and then, of course, the $50 million. So we need to think about those things as well. But yeah.
So Regent Parasker, we have a meeting scheduled just this Friday with all 7 of the public universities foundation representatives to talk about need-based aid for university students, as well as our comprehensive grant program. And so, and all the different things, the Kangaroo initiative for engineering and all the things to make sure that they are aware of the success we have on the state side and where can we leverage that to leverage more donations and philanthropy.
Fantastic. Thank you.
More?
Thank you very much. So when I was in the legislature, I didn't see this part of it, the agency-specific adjustments. So those, this is a question. So those are things that we assumed were in the base, and they were multi-year, that the Department of Administration, Budget Office decided, no, they weren't, so they pulled those out.
Yes, and we as a state certainly do not have a zero-based budget in any way, shape, or form, but I would say anything that's in the state general fund budget is up for that decision legitimately. And so the Department of Administration, the Division of the Budget, has that role of setting the rules according for the state budget process. Now, whether the legislature and the Legislative Budget Committee and how they will approach that starting point, I think maybe is yet to be seen. But I understand, so because the Division of the Budget has purview for this process, we use their budget system to enter our budgets, and we do that according to their rules and this allocation. So the universities, for example, will have already submitted their base budgets just as you see them in that table for the allocation. And we have a base budget as well, and it's what the board decides to include as enhancements, then that is what the legislature will see as the list of add backs. And so it is confusing for legislators. In the past, it has been confusing, where something like student success, they have funded it for maybe 1, 2, 3 years, and here we are asking for it again. And in their mind, they're not realizing or they're not knowing this process behind the scenes in that level of detail.
With the legislature now doing their own budget ahead of time, which starts, you said in October, I think I saw.
I think so.
That will be important to watch to see what they prioritize.
How they approach that. Will they approach it as with using the same, okay, this is everybody's base and this is their starting point and these are the enhancements, or will they merge all that together? Will they make their own decisions on what's in and what's out? Typically, the first decision, at least last year, their approach was that first decision was if it's an enhancement, take it out, strip that out. But then that is left with the base. That's your starting point. So they were, to that degree, they were adopting the division of budget methodology in that regard.
And do we know yet whether, I've heard mixed, whether the Senate and the House separately are going to do a budget? Last year they did it together, I believe, but I mean, the interim, not when the session starts. Have we heard yet whether it's going to be together or separate?
I'm afraid I have not heard.
Okay.
The Legislative Budget Committee did have a meeting in late August, and they received a new State General Fund profile, which looked a little worse, if you will, than what we talked about at the retreat. But how they will then, will it be the Legislative Budget Committee, the Joint Committee, or will they have some other group? Last year it was a separate group, I think a larger group, who did all of that. So I'm not sure how they're going to do that yet. And I don't know if they've decided or worked that out.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? the other overall, of how the budget request works this year?
Well, I think there's been clear feedback from policymakers that there was perhaps some dissatisfaction with the scale of the requests in prior years. It's the board's dilemma. You have 32 public institutions, 200 some thousand students you're trying to serve and advocate for, and the legislature is looking to you to figure out how to handle a list of, present us with something that's manageable from a legislative point of view.
And to that end, I think we talked about it a little bit at the retreat, based on some conversations that Chairman Benson and myself had with the state budget director back in May as to how tight the budget would be this year. Also commentary that we all received at different points last year during the session, that the ask that we came in to the legislature last year was out of line with what their expectations were and what they were expecting, and kind of giving a indication to us that we needed to be more back into a little reality of what the potential was within the state budget going forward. And as Elaine said, when you look at the cash reserves going out to fiscal year 28, 29, where the spend is supposed to be. So with that, with what we discussed at the retreat, kind of trying to look at having a budget and unified budget request this year that was more in line with what was the potential. We had discussions at the board retreat and some discussions even after that, trying to make the budget request more unified, and had some good feedback from the CFOs as to how we could do that. And a lot of the focus then since the retreat in early August has been to try to align things with the public universities, the research institutions, the regionals, where their asks were in line with each other, so that when we went to the legislature, that it was something that they could get behind, that the universities were all working together in this regard. And so that's where the process has kind of taken itself since the board retreat. And since that time, as we've narrowed down the request and to what are the baseline assumptions, and then the board requests for a broader impact on Kansas. We've gotten some different feedback from the state budget office as to what the regionals, whether that was reoccurring or one time and in the budget. We've gotten some positive feedback in that regard. And during this month and a half, Chairman Benson, Vice Chairman Mendoza, and myself at different times have met with the state leaders to not necessarily present each line item to them, but talk about what the request is looking like, what the overall dollar amount would be, to try to get some feedback from them, whether or not this was something that they felt would be in line and a possibility during the legislative session coming up in 26. So far, all of the feedback from the state leaders, having met with the governor, the Speaker of the House, and President of the Senate, all received what we felt was very positive feedback from them based on what the budget size would be compared to last year, what the line items were, and all. And so feel very comfortable after many different iterations that Elaine, Chairman Benson, President Flanders have put the time and effort in over the last month and a half with the universities and their feedback. I know Chairman Benson had many conversations with the university presidents and the chancellor during this process to get where we are today. And with the budget, I don't know, Elaine, if you want to go any more details, but at a big picture, outside of one to be determined, we will be coming in with a budget request this year that would be, if approved today by the board, $5 million less than what the ask was last year. So I think we have heeded the advice of the legislators and the leaders based on last year's session, where we need to be. And hopefully with this, that we will be able to lock in what all of you had to spend last year with the enhancements that we are looking for this year after you take out the items that the budget office removed, as Elaine has already explained. So with that, I'll let Elaine go over the items. Now, is everybody in
No.
here?
No.
Okay.
So I can just rattle them off for everybody. So the way we've organized the items, we would start with what we're calling baseline assumptions, one of which would be continue the Campus Restoration Act at the statutory level, which would mean for the state universities, $30 million. So the universities have come up with 5 or 6 year plans for that funding, and it's going to be quite challenging to envision signing a contract after you've gone out for bid for a multi-year project if you're not clear on whether that funding will be there for you in the future. So hoping that the next 5 years of the Campus Restoration Act can hold at $30 million a year. And the second item would be to continue student financial aid at the same level as we benefited from for 2026. So not asking for additional funding for financial aid, but seeking to hold where we are with the need-based aid for public university students and the programs administered at the board office, like the Promise Scholarship and the Comprehensive Grant Program. The other underlying assumption is that the state will continue to fund state aid for the tiered, non-tiered, and Excel and CTE courses delivered by the 2-year colleges. We do not know what that cost is. We do that calculation. We'll be doing that calculation in the coming weeks. So we won't know that until the time when it becomes time in November for us to submit our budget appeal to the Division of Budget and the governor. And we will also provide that information, of course, to the interim legislative committees who are working on the budget so that they can know what that expense will be. Last year, those 3 items together added to a net of $7 million, an additional $7 million. So, but we don't know how that'll play out for using our AY 2025 data. So we don't have an amount pegged to that yet. That's the TBD item. The other 2 items as a baseline assumption is that the state legislature will continue to fund student success initiatives at the same level in 27 as they did for 2026. That does require $16.3 million to be added as an enhancement in our budget. And that is to do all the things that the institutions have all committed to doing that are ongoing expenses for hiring and advising staff, and all the activities to serve students, make sure that we have a degree map so it's clear when a student comes in, you know what program you want to be in, how do you get from here to there and get to completion in a timely way. So we've had a lot of momentum in that area. We've improved our graduation rates. We've improved our retention rates. So we want to see that continues. So that's 16.3 million. We also have 4 new items that the board would include in that $40 million that keeps us pegged in 27 below 26. One of which is $2 million for Kansans with some college, no degree. So last November, when we were at K-State for a board meeting, a firm called Re-Up did a presentation for the board. So funding for $2 million would be to engage with a third party who would help us as a system go find Kansans who have some college credit, but they don't yet have a credential. How can we get them across the finish line? That would benefit our state, our employers, as well as the individuals affected. So we see that as a strong investment. We have $5.5 million for the Blueprint for Literacy. We got $10 million for that in 2025. And we've used some of that. We will be using the rest of that in 2026. That money carried over from one year to the next for us. So we are doing scholarships for in-service teachers, for example, who need to go get that credential and take those courses to retrain so that they can better handle teaching students how to read. So improving our literacy rate. So restoring us for $5.5 million for the blueprint will be very important for us. And then we've got $15 million pegged at $5 million each for the 3 research universities, KU, K-State, and Wichita State, for addressing the future energy needs of Kansas. And each of them are coming at it a slightly different way. KU has a Kansas Center for Energy Production at $5 million. K-State has the Nuclear Research Accelerator for $5 million. And Wichita State also has $5 million for looking at alternative energy sources. So $15 million total for that item. And then Washburn University has $1.5 million added in the enhancement list so that they can also benefit similarly to the 3 state universities, the regional institutions, for benefiting Northeast Kansas in regional growth and workforce development. And those numbers all totaled up to $40.3 million. So in sum total, where in our allocation, we had benefited from just under $1.2 billion, with the $50 million extracted, we're basically asking for $40 million of that back. And there's some other nets adjustments in there, but we would net $4.6 million less than what the legislature provided to the system in 2026.
Any questions?
Thank you for that detailed explanation.
for the committee?
Very well rounded, yeah.
Regent Moore?
Thank you. So in the literacy request, Blueprint for Literacy, the first year was 10 million. Last year they gave us 0. This year our request is 5.5 million. What's left on the table that they won't be doing as a result of the cut?
I'm afraid I'm going to have to consult with Dr. Lane on that.
Okay.
So she, when we, as soon as the board acts on a unified request, we will be rushing to gather all the details to assemble into the narrative to explain why these are the investments that we want to propose with the legislature. And one of those things I need to clarify is what will be foregoing or what we will be able to do with $5.5 million.
I spoke too soon. I have one comment to make. On the money that the universities will be receiving for digital literacy, are we going to look at what do we have currently? And if the universities are able to kind of work on how to improve the baseline, and then the $5 million will be invested from pushing on that.
Oh,
Would
yes.
that be something? Yeah.
So, Regent Carrasco, one of the very first things, or among the first things that the college deans of education were working on with Dr. Lane and the Literacy Advisory Committee was adding courses or modifying their curriculum and how they are training pre-service teachers and teaching students to read. And so that has already been, I think, fully implemented. And they had to do that 2 years ago or 1 year ago. I'm losing sense of time now. But at one point, there was a proviso that would have lapsed some of the university's funding if they had not done certain things related to their course curriculum. And they all did those things. So no funding was ever lapsed.
Okay.
But that was one of the very first things that they addressed was what is our curriculum and how we're teaching our students to prepare students to read. And so I think that's already part of our baseline.
Got it.
And Dr.
Okay.
Lane could come in and correct me, and I'll check with her. But I think a chunk of this money will be to continue to make sure that teachers who our institutions have launched into the workforce and they are out there working with children now and students, making sure that they get the retraining that they need to be addressed at no cost to them.
Mm-hmm.
So some of this pays the tuition for the new courses at the graduate level at the institutions.
I know in commentary that I've heard commented to some of the state leaders, the $5.5 million is money for training the trainers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that some of the additional funding in the past years and requests was for Centers for Excellence. Yeah, that money has been what is pulled out of our requests to the legislature, and the $5.5 million would be going toward training the trainers so that we get the teachers out there that can help the kids.
The ultimate goal of digital literacy and the goals that digital literacy group has put together.
I'll be very grateful to the legislature if they give us the 5 million in light that we got 0 last year. I just want to make sure that we will be able to move the dial on this, because if we don't in a few years, hopefully we'll have it long enough to see some progress. If we don't in a few years, we're likely to lose it. Probably would lose it. So just hopeful that that money is sufficient that we can show progress over the course of a few years.
No questions for me, Chair. I can move.
Do any of the university CEOs have any commentary, they want to make at this point? Good response. With that, I think.
Like it's not our job as academic.
With that, I would take a motion to accept the Regents Unified Appropriations Request for fiscal year 2027 as presented here this morning.
I can move. I
Got
can
a-
second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So we will now take this recommendation from this committee to the full board at the meeting this afternoon and go from there. So now I gotta get back and find out where I am in this meeting here. So that, Elaine, anything else on any of the board agenda items? Yeah, consider discussion or
so.
consent or discussion?
I think that's all.
Yeah. Perfect. Go back to a different tab here. We will do and have already discussed here the Campus Restoration Act. We'll hear from the universities this afternoon, or is that this afternoon or tomorrow? 2-day meetings getting me confused.
One of these 2 days, yes.
One of the 2 days. So we will hear on item F at the full board meeting. Yeah, the next item on the agenda is review any audit findings. Yeah, and at this point in time, I don't believe there are any audits outstanding or items at any of the universities. So no action to be taken there. Which takes us to other committee business with 16 minutes to spare. Well, let's not get carried away. It's just the first one. Yeah. No other items? Yeah, I would take a motion to adjourn. Yeah, the Fiscal Affairs and Audit Standing Committee. for
I
today.
can move.
And move second. Yeah, thank you to the two of you for your effort there and coordinating those. We got a small committee at this point in time. Yeah, so we will stand adjourned. Yeah, CFOs, thank you very much for all your time and effort working on the budget, working with Chairman Benson and the staff here with Elaine and Blake through the whole process. And hopefully, we're in a good spot on September, 17th? Yeah, going into the legislative session that we will get this all approved at that point in time. So with that.